Good morning, everybody. Who likes charts? Good. Your ship has come in. Okay, everybody ready? Well, I'm here with Congressman Jason Smith, who's the ranking member of the House Budget Committee, and we're going to put a fine point on this week. The good news for the American consumer, there's not going to be any more inflation in your stockings because of Build Back Better. I want to thank Senator Manchin and others for standing their ground. And my belief is that Build Back Better never gets better. It will never get better. You can't make this thing, you can't put lipstick on a pig. And when it comes to inflation and deficit spending, this thing is a monster pig. So let's start with this idea. Our Democratic colleagues say that the CBO score is fake. And she's growing on me, by the way. I think she does a good job. This is a fake CBO score that's not based on the actual bill that anybody is voting on. Press Secretary Jen Psaki. Okay. Next. Senator Durbin, one of my closest friends. He's a good guy. Senator Graham is making up numbers. It's Lindsey at his best. You know, he's waxing loyal followers of Donald Trump, who apparently must be the CBO. And Republicans have some preposterous number to quote on the air. We know what the cost is going to be, and it's nowhere near that. To my good friend Senator Durbin, I promise you I'm not Svengali. Neither one of us have hold over CBO. We didn't make up the numbers. They analyzed the bill, and we'll talk about that later. But I find that the White House spokesperson and Senator Durbin are attacking the CBO because if they can't successfully pull that off, they're in trouble. Here's the problem with their attack on CBO. Feel like I'm on Wheel of Fortune here. Okay. There was another time where there was a different view of the CBO. The estimates from the CBO, which is really, as you know, the gold standard, no Republican or Democrat questions it. President Biden back in 2010. So I want the American people to know that this score from the CBO about the actual cost of the bill is not fake, it's real. The effect on the deficit is not fake, it's real. And so let's go talk about what they've said about this bill in terms of cost. President Biden said, "My Build Back Better agenda costs $0. My plans are fiscally responsible. They're fully paid for. They don't add a single penny to the deficit." Vice President Harris, "Let me be clear. Our Build Back Better Act is fully paid for. It reduces the deficit by more than $100 billion over the next 10 years, December the 2nd, 2021. Treasury Secretary Yellen, "Build Back Better is fully paid for, or even more than fully paid for." Speaker Pelosi, "Build Back Better is solidly paid for." Senator Sanders, Bernie Sanders, "The reconciliation bill is paid for in its entirety. It will not have an impact on inflation." White House Chief of Staff Ron Klein, "This package adds nothing to the debt." Nothing to the debt. Well, all lies. It is not paid for, and if you don't believe me, let's look at what CBO said. CBO said that the deficit will increase by $3 trillion. So when the President, the Vice President, the Treasury Secretary, the Speaker of the House, Senator Bernie Sanders as Chairman of the Budget Committee, and the Chief of Staff to President Biden, Ron Klein, say it is fully paid for, it will not add to the deficit, CBO says that's not true. CBO says it will add $3 trillion to the deficit. Who do you believe, them or CBO? And what happened here? Jason and myself asked the Congressional Budget Office to score Build Back Better, assuming that the 17 programs with a sunset clause would actually stay in being for 10 years, which is reality. Ronald Reagan said the closest thing to immortality on earth is a government program. So we all know that these spending programs Democrats are trying to put in Build Back Better, they don't want them to go away. And if history's any judge, they won't go away. So when the CBO looked at these programs being spending for 10 years, not 1, 2, or 3 years, it went to $4.9 trillion. The $1.75 trillion number is a result of budget gimmicks. They artificially limit the length of the programs to get the number to $1.75 trillion over 10. If you do away with the gimmicks, and Joe Manchin said, let's look at what Joe Manchin said. Do we have that quote? And this is one of the reasons that we decided to ask CBO to look at the bill. What I see are shell games and budget gimmicks that make the real cost of this so-called $1.75 trillion bill estimate to be twice as high if the programs are extended or made permanent. That is a recipe for economic crisis. None of us should ever misrepresent to the American people what the real cost of the legislation is. So to my Democratic colleagues, you have been misrepresenting to the American people the real cost of this bill, and CBO scored the bill without gimmicks, and it went from, put it back, 1.75 to almost $5 trillion. It is not paid for. Without gimmicks, it adds $3 trillion to the deficit. So I think Build Back Better is dead, not for just 2021, but forever. If my Democratic colleagues who have been talking about what they won't do hold firm. If you really don't want to vote for a bill that adds to the deficit, then you can't vote for Build Back Better. If you don't want to vote for a bill full of gimmicks, you cannot vote for Build Back Better. If you try to raise taxes to pay for the $3 trillion deficit spending, then you're going to have to massively increase taxes on an economy that doesn't need any more tax increases. $5 trillion is the true cost because these programs never go away. I can't think of a worse recipe for inflation than passing a bill that would spend $5 trillion. Build Back Better declares war on fossil fuels. The Green New Deal component of Build Back Better will increase gas prices, I think, by $1 a gallon at a time when it's hurting working people already. So Build Back Better, when it comes to child care, collapses child care as we know it. It makes it hard for the private sector to stay in the child care business. It mandates increased cost, and it virtually is impossible for religious institutions to participate in the child care program drafted by Build Back Better. So they're talking $12,000 to $13,000 additional cost to the consumer from child care because they replace the private sector with a government-run child care. This bill is inflationary. This bill blows a $3 trillion hole in already a growing deficit. It is not paid for. This bill is twice the cost being advertised. This bill does not pass scrutiny. And it's not me saying that. It's the Congressional Budget Office that used to be the gold standard. What have I learned? If a policy or a rule gets in the way of the liberal agenda, it will be shredded. Senator Warren is calling for packing the court because she doesn't like the makeup of the court. Democrats are talking about eliminating the Electoral College because it gets in the way of them winning. We're talking about adding 2 new states because the 50 states we have is not enough, apparently, to deliver the liberal agenda they're all hoping and praying for. Now it's the CBO. The CBO went from the gold standard to fake, not because of any change at the CBO, because of the change in Joe Biden. The Joe Biden of 2010 doesn't exist. The Democratic Party of just a few years ago doesn't exist. These folks are on a mission to grow this government, to replace the private sector everywhere they can, and they see this as their last best chance. They're acting as if there's a mandate for all this. There's not. This is a 50-50 Senate. The only thing between the American public and an inflation bomb called Build Back Better, an unpaid for bill that adds $3 trillion to the deficit, is a handful of Democratic senators. And here's what I would tell my Democratic colleagues. The public is with you. West Virginia is with you. It is not only time to have a timeout on this bill. It's a time to bury this bill. This bill doesn't get better over time. There are some provisions in this bill that maybe we could have a bipartisan agreement on once inflation calms down and cools down. I don't mind having that discussion, but right now is not the time to add any more federal spending, growing the government, and creating a problem for inflation. So I'm hoping that the highest inflation rate in 40 years, combined with a CBO score, will stop the madness. That come back next year and let's focus on two things: lowering inflation and rebuilding the supply chain, rather than expanding the government in a way that will do more harm than good. Congressman Smith has been an indispensable partner in getting the CBO to score the bill without gimmicks, and I will now turn it over to him, and I appreciate all your leadership.